Alright everyone, we're still on the Rittenhouse verdict watch. At this point, going through, I think halfway through now, day 3, normally if they were going to exonerate Kyle Rittenhouse on all charges, or they were going to throw the book at him, you would probably expect a verdict quicker. But that's not the subject of this video because we have absolutely no way of knowing what's happening. Honestly, hung jury at this point seems the most likely, but there was a surreal story earlier with regards to MSNBC slash NBC, of course. Stelter, Potato Man, actually, link in the description, archived, of course, weighing in on this, talking about the statement that was released by MSNBC. There was apparently a freelancer who followed the jury bus the other day, was tailgating them and ran a red light and therefore got captured in the process of doing so. And by James J. Morrison, this is the name, I guess, of the freelancer, claiming to the police to be working explicitly for MSNBC for Irene Bayon, who has since nuked her Twitter account, which lends credence to the idea that indeed this is what happened. The judge in the case, Judge Schroeder, has banned MSNBC, NBC reporters from the courtroom, actually through the verdict. So you've got a case here where you've had attempted jury intimidation now for months and months. You've had legacy media, lamestream politicians, etc., weighing in on the case. You know, you'd have the Maxine Water type saying, we should stay in the streets if we don't get the verdict that we want. Now you've got a situation where MSNBC swears up and down, and I don't believe this for a second, by the way, well, this freelancer wasn't acting on any orders, wasn't trying to photograph the jurors, wasn't trying to do anything, and then we have a conflicting account saying that they wanted to set up potential interviews post-trial with these individuals on the jury. I think this was an attempt to dox the jurors, to intimidate them further. The legacy media has done this repeatedly. It's good that they've been banned from the courtroom. Really, though, they should be looked into by the FBI. Will they? No, of course not. Law enforcement won't do anything about this. The Kenosha police won't do anything about this. Rittenhouse and people like him have had to deal with this horseshit now for years and years and years, where you've got a completely dishonest system in which the legacy media acts as judge, jury, and executioner, spewing lies. They've defamed him a number of times, and this is provable. They haven't even bothered to retract, in many cases, not just MSNBC, but others, the idea that Rittenhouse trafficked a weapon across state lines, the idea that his mother was culpable for driving him, which she didn't. There's no proof of that. The idea that Rittenhouse is a white supremacist of one stripe or another. The idea that Rittenhouse broke curfew. All of these things have been proven untrue, or at least there's no evidence for them specifically. And they're still reported on regularly as though, you know, the news came out today and was uncontrovertible. Now we've got a situation where Potato Man from CNN has to try to defend his fellow legacy media acolytes because, you know, they all work together. They all take marching orders from the same source, or sources, rather. When there was a failure to potentially dox the jurors, and I don't doubt that that was the case. I think that this is horseshit when they come out and they issue a statement within not that long, only a few hours, and say, well, he was acting alone. We never told him to tail the bus or anything like that. No, I think at the very least, this individual approached them and essentially said, like, hey, you know, I want to get some big breaking shit that I want to give to MSNBC. And they probably, like, sarcastically remarked, well, can you get a picture of the jurors or something like that? And of course it never happened. The Kenosha police picking this individual up, initially they weren't sure that it was even a journalist. Initially, the report from the Kenosha police is very cautiously worded. An individual who alleges to be working for MSNBC was running a red light speeding after this bus. Now we know that, I mean, it's not alleged. This individual apparently did work for MSNBC, NBC, based on the fact that the individual named in his particular account to the police nuked their Twitter account. I would think that that would be relevant. And then getting banned from the courtroom. This is extremely odd, extremely bizarre. At this point, weighing in on the trial, because we don't have a verdict yet. We might not even get one tonight. I'm hoping that we will, but that's not necessarily a certainty. As it drags on, of course, this means potentially the more damning charges have been put off the table, which means it takes longer because they have to look at all of the lesser included. They had a jury letter that they sent back talking about wanting additional footage, actually not that long ago, so they're still considering things. It means that an outright acquittal may be more unlikely, but I think a hanged jury would be the most likely here. I think there might be holdouts that want more information. I have a feeling that either a large group of jurors, maybe 8, 9, 10 of them, either want to outright acquit, which would be the right thing to do, and there are a couple of holdouts that need to be convinced. Or a lot of them want maybe some lesser included, but there are others that want to acquit, or they just want to throw the book at him, potentially, and they're holding out. Regardless of the case, though, this is jury intimidation, following the black-windowed, the tinted-windowed bus, and trying to follow them, trying to see where do the jurors live. What are their names? This would be exactly what you would expect from the legacy media. They've done this over and over again. Can you imagine, by the way, let me posit this. Let's say that Andy No, or Tim Pool, or me, or somebody like us, somebody who does independent commentary, journalism, whatever, were to try to tail the jury bus for the Rittenhouse trial, or any other trial for that matter. What would the headlines be right now? They'd be fresh off the press already, I guarantee it. There wouldn't be this half-assed defense by MSNBC. It would be extremist, vigilante attempts to dox a bunch of jurors. That's exactly what the title would be, because it would benefit them, because it's their competitors. I'm finding it very, very interesting, therefore, that there aren't more individuals that are calling this out, calling it exactly what it is, which is probably the same thing. It's an attempt to dox jury members. It's an attempt to interfere with the trial, by and large. That's what I fully believe. And of course, if Rittenhouse is found not guilty, or if there's a mistrial with prejudice, and then they can't really do anything about that. Even if there's a mistrial with prejudice, they might not recharge him. I hope that he comes out. I hope he sues all these people. I hope that he sues them into the ground and gets even richer than Nick Sandman with the Covington kids after the kerfuffle there where the legacy media refused to do its job. This is not an attempt at journalism. This is apparently a freelancer trying to get at least a couple of pics. What would you want to get pictures of? When they put out their, link in the description again, when they put out their little presser and they say, well, this person was not intending to take pictures of the jury. This freelancer, keep that in mind. That's important for legal purposes, potentially. This individual that we probably talked with beforehand was not trying to communicate with the jury members and not trying to photograph them. May I ask a question? You're a freelancer. Your whole job is to get pictures, get interviews, etc. That's how you make your money, to be clear. What else exactly were they trying to get? The addresses of the jurors? They were just going to snap a pic of the house? Were they just trying to get a pic of the bus? Well, they could have done that without running a red light now, couldn't they have? This story doesn't make any sense. I'm not surprised that the judge was very concerned, referred the matter to the Kenosha police, which I don't have any faith in at all, looking at the initial Kenosha riots, neither would any other reasonable individual, and banning them from the courtroom. Should ban all the legacy media. The only people allowed in the courtroom for the purposes of recording should be literal freelancers, people with a webcam. They're more trustworthy. They're the ones that, by and large, don't have the means even to hire a freelancer to attempt to dox a bunch of jurors in order to intimidate them and affect the outcome of the trial. That's exactly what they want. They want Rittenhouse to go to jail for the rest of his life. To be clear, MSNBC makes a lot more money if they get to say, guilty, 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 the headline tomorrow, or the next day, or whenever they make a decision. It'll either be like guilty, guilty, guilty. White supremacist gets 50 years in prison or something. They don't have to face a defamation suit because they did defame him. All their sponsors and all their corporate partners, by and large, defamed him. They don't have to worry about those cases anymore because he was found guilty. Well, there's no defamation then, because the person's in jail, can't really do anything from there, from in a cell, very limited capabilities of actual outside legal contact at that point. You know, you can sue, but you can't show up for the trial or anything like that. They're hoping for this. Likewise, the tagline tomorrow might be not guilty on all charges, but they don't want that. Because that doesn't pay. The only reason why that would pay is to look at the riots that then subsequently happen, which are assured if that occurs, and then they'd have to actually do on-the-ground journalism. They might get a BLM member throwing rocks at them. Well, that's way more dangerous than just saying, oh, justice was served. Today, racial justice prevailed as evil white supremacist Kyle Rittenhouse was put in the gulag for the rest of his natural-born days for defending himself. That's what they want. That's why they want to intimidate the jury. And the jury, by the way, is not sequestered. They'll be aware of this fact. I hate to tell you this, but the fact that the jury is not sequestered is a huge problem too, because these people aren't supposed to talk about the case. They're not supposed to Google it. They're not supposed to look it up on YouTube. They're not supposed to look it up on Rumble or anything like that, but they do. Of course they did. When they got home, they looked up the case. They're taking a pulse. It's just like when the Supreme Court is not supposed to take the pulse of the public and weigh in, weigh what people think about a case. They're not supposed to take that into consideration. They're supposed to make their decisions essentially in a vacuum. Do they? No. We know this. We're well aware of this fact. They punted on gay marriage for the better part of a decade until all of the states were beginning to legalize it, and then they went with the case. They did the same thing on a million other issues. And guns. Even on guns. They waited until a bunch of states had nullified federal law, and then they went forward with a McDonald versus Chicago, Heller versus D.C. Well, the same is true of a jury. The jury is going to be even more capable of doing that. These people, they're not appointed for life. They live in the community. They've got more to lose than a Supreme Court justice. Supreme Court justice, if there's a threat to them, all of a sudden 4 or 5 heavily armed dudes show up outside of their house for the next week. These jurors, they don't have that luxury. They're normal people from within the community. I guarantee they can be intimidated. They were talking the other day about how people, they had to stay 100 yards away from the courthouse. But the jurors could apparently still hear them with a bullhorn, which means that if you have a preponderance of people there, and you do, who are BLM, Antifa, etc., they're going to be shouting about how Kyle Rittenhouse is an evildoer and echoing Maxine Waters. Another big problem. The legacy media, by the way, caused the initial riots in the wake of Jacob Blake, who attacked several police officers with a deadly weapon before he was shot. That happened first. They caused those riots. They whipped people up into a frenzy. They've caused what will potentially become a frenzy here, even if they find him guilty on several lesser charges, assuming there's not a mistrial. You're going to have a situation where there are riots because he didn't get first-degree murder. And the legacy media has caused this over and over and over. The lies of the so-called journalists, the corporate media complex within the United States, in partnership, by the way, with big tech. So fuck the big tech sites. In partnership, these two groups have caused thousands of deaths over the last few years. No holds barred. Absolutely. They've caused thousands of deaths. They've caused literally billions of dollars in property damage. They've caused juries to be intimidated. They've caused the judge in this case, who has shown no clear bias whatsoever, to have thousands of death threats sent towards him. Do you think the FBI for a moment is going to look into those as much as it looks into parents that go to school board meetings and protest critical race theory? I don't. I don't have any faith in them whatsoever. They're clearly not doing their job. Even if they want to do their job, their higher-ups don't want them to do them. So, the little average FBI agent's like, maybe I should have chosen a different career. This is surreal, though, to have supposedly, and this is really, it's technically up in the air, supposedly a freelancer, totally not on orders from NBC, MSNBC, tailing the jury bus to try to follow it, running a red light in the process. How much do you have to be promised? You know there's cops everywhere. You know that if you get caught, there's probably a problem. You run a red light. How much money were you promised for a shot of these jurors, or something akin to that? And I guarantee that that was the case. in order to actually risk your own exposure. All you had to do is wait at the light for like 10 seconds and then proceed. Maybe you speed a little bit, but at least you're a little bit further away from the police. How much do you have to be promised in order to do this? That's my question. It's a question that won't be asked by the Kenosha police. It probably won't be asked by the defense at this point because they appear to be somewhat inept. It won't be asked by MSNBC. It won't be asked by their supposed competitors at CNN because they're covering for them, aka Brian Stelter, Potato Man. By the way, did you know that Potato Man, you know, Baldy there, who looks like he's 70 fucking years old, did you know he's only like a year and a half older than I am? Who would have possibly guessed? And this has happened before. Look at the breadliners and how they're aging. This is this is an attempt to interfere with an active criminal case, quite clearly. If ever there were grounds for a mistrial, an attempt by a person in the court to photograph the jury, an attempt by an MSNBC freelancer to tail the jury bus, to probably attempt to dox the jury, and you know, you can't tell that for sure, but it's probable. There's probable cause involved. All of the prosecutorial misconduct, how much more do you need for a mistrial, is what I would ask. At what point has a person's constitutional rights, and the rights of the jury, technically speaking at this point, been violated to the point where you just throw the case out and say, look, you can't try this case. It's impossible. Yeah, how can you get a fair trial under such conditions? That's what I would like to know. That's about all. Peace out.